You're watching a webinar from Documentary Business, also distributed by PAC, the UK Producers Association. I'm Peter Hamilton, and we're taking a deep dive into the status of the pipeline of productions in the US for leading unscripted networks. And Dan Salerno is going to take us through the data. It's great to see you, Dan. You've done so much work on this. It's original research, and you've synthesized it, summarized it in a really informative way. So great to have you on board for this, I think, important, year-end webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. I enjoy our conversations. We cover so many. I know we could probably go way longer than what our time is allotted, but yeah, it's a lot of the numbers are interesting, but behind numbers are stories. So hopefully we can share some of the stories and then what it means to the production community that it's always trying to kind of break through, particularly here in the U.S. Of course, is what we're focused on.
So Caitlin is producing the webinar, and I'm going to ask Caitlin to go to the first slide, and we're going to get started. So I'm going to read the title of the slide. It's called Program Trends, Discovery and Nat Geo Channel, New Titles and Hours, 2022 and 2025. So it's showing how many titles and how many hours Nat Geo and Discovery, in reverse order, have commissioned over these years. So Dan, why don't you describe the chart in a little more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think the most important thing about all of these little bar graphs that we're going to share is that it's the directional nature of the information. You don't want to get too hung up on a specific number. And as we talk about titles, specific titles, but what we do want to pay attention to is where are things going and what is the story that's developing there. And then if I'm somebody maybe on the network or the distribution side, what does that mean to me? And if I'm on a production side of the discussion, what does that mean for me as well? To kind of walk through the format of the graphs themselves, we've got two networks up here, in this case, Discovery on the left and Nat Geo on the right. Looking at each of them individually, we'll go through these. But just to highlight, this is a 4-year trend. Blue is 2022, 4 years ago, and then it goes in natural order. Green is 23, orange is 24, and yellow is 25. So 22 through 25 as a 4-year trend. And it's a pretty good time frame to look at because it's coming right out of the pandemic. So the influence of the pandemic at this point has largely sort of dissipated in those 22 figures. And you kind of quote back to normal, whatever normal was at that time. And then what we're going to look at really is the impact then, the streaming era of our industry and where everything went from that point to today with the impact of cord cutting and consolidation and contraction and so forth.
So Dan, I'm going to ask you a question. Tell me what on the blue chart for Discovery, the two blue charts, the one on the left represents what and how many hours is that, and the one or how many units, and the blue column on the right in 2022, what does that represent?
Yeah, it's a great question. Just for clarification, and unfortunately, we weren't able to get sort of numbers on the what is the X or the Y axis that goes up and down. But the smaller bar there, the little one with Discovery, the number there is 69 if you can't read it. And that represents the number of titles. Okay, that's the number of titles that they premiered in calendar 22. And a title can be a single hour. It can be a 2-hour special. It can be a limited or a mini series, probably 3, 4, 5 episodes. Or it can be a long form series of 6, 8, 10, 12. And in the case of some of these networks like Discovery and TLC, History, even, you can get as many as 20 plus episodes with some of these series. So it's the number of total projects available. And if you just think of it in an operational sense, that's 69 contracts, that's 69 production management, filings, that's 69 different unique commissions that producers had a chance to work on. And it represents a rather significant, in this case, number of hours. That number is 636. That's the tall bar on that chart. 636 total hours. Okay. That's not necessarily episodes, that's hours. In the case of half hours, of course, you get 2 episodes per hour. So 636 hours is the base that we're working from on Discovery Channel here in the US, representing 69 titles. If we sort of jump, Peter, into the trend that we're seeing already, and it's a pretty easy one to see here. It's a little harder on the number of titles, the little smaller columns. You go from 69, 42, 42, 35. So you see an immediate drop from 22 to 23 on the volume of titles. That's largely driven because the number of specials fell off and not the number of series. But you also see a pretty dramatic drop, probably about 20%, in the volume of hours in total. It goes from 636 to 528. That's a real number. You go into the following year in 2024 and you start to see that drop continue. And then you see it, we're projecting, because we don't have final year-end numbers for 25 yet. They could announce a series that shows up for the last 6 weeks, and 371 might become 378 or something. But for the most part, we're projecting about 370 hours by the end of this year, representing 35 projects. The key there, though, Peter, I mean, really, you probably pick up on it right away. It doesn't take a genius to figure out, in a very short period of time, 3.5, 4 years, we went from 636 hours to 371 hours. That's a drop of 260 hours that are no longer on the marketplace for distributors, for producers, for co-production partners, etc. That is a significant number. And it honestly it's understandable. It's a reflection of how the linear marketplace is shifting. Shouldn't be a surprise to anybody when we talk about it, because we've been talking about it for quite some time. Budget contraction, network contraction, cord cutting is knocking the affiliate bases down by 30-40% over a few years ago. So it stands to reason that the programming is going to follow. But it's a major trend you're seeing very clearly with Discovery Channel, and
that's Discovery Channel.
Talk about it with the others.
Dan, just to be really clear, that's Discovery Channel, not Discovery Networks. And we're going to look at ID in a minute. And
yeah, that is correct.
TLC. Well, let's move on to Nat Geo, which is it's in the same slide, a radically different picture, except for the drop off in 2025 this year.
Yeah, it is. And it tells a slightly different story, which is well, it's going to have, I think, kind of a little bit of a more positive feel, quite frankly, when we get to that 2025 story, even though it might not look like it. What we're seeing here is, in contrast to Discovery, that was really massively, high volume. Okay. Nat Geo made the decision several years ago with the kind of the fewer, bigger, better mentality that we've seen take over a lot of these services, including the streamers, right? And that's something that we have talked about quite a bit as well. So in a way, they were already kind of in a manageable level just even a few years ago, just under 300 hours, about 275 hours or so. And they maintained, plus or minus 10 hours, 15 hours, that steady sort of rhythm across the last 3 years. And that's encouraging. And it was also true even in the number of projects. I mean, the number of projects dipped a little bit, went from 30, 29, 25. So you're not that far off. As a percentage, 25 is about a 15% drop, but you're not that far off. But what do we see happen now this year, 2025? We actually do see a measurable drop off in the volume of hours that we're projecting. It's about a maybe 25% drop off. You're dropping down from about 300 hours to 2.25. So it's a pretty sizable percentage drop off. The actual number of projects, though, still remains not too bad. It's still 22 projects this year compared to 25 last year.
So fewer episodes per series? Is that what's happening,
there's
or
fewer
more specials?
I've started to look at fewer episodes per series. It's interesting you asked that. It's a great question, because 4 years ago, to get very specific, according to my numbers, they did 9.2 episodes per series. Now, that doesn't include limited series. That's just the long form series, 9.2 episodes. They dropped it to 9, held steady for 2 years at 9. And this year, they're just below 8 episodes per series. So it doesn't
Interesting.
sound like a lot. You only fell off about 1 episode per series. But when you take that on average with, 22 series, that's 22 hours of content. Okay. Let's ballpark it, Peter, at what? 350 an hour value of content. You knock off 20 to 25 hours. What is 300,000 times 20, right?
600,000, yeah.
6 million.
Excuse me, 6 million.
Yeah, one extra zero there. $6 million. So if you are Disney and you're working with Nat Geo and you're trying to find ways to kind of crimp a little here and save a little there, just like we all do in our regular lives, $6 million is a real number. And you go, hey, I can knock off $6 million, and it's only going from 9 episodes to 8 episodes. So the impact isn't so great, right? It's that sort of small trim that isn't big, in terms of a single project, but cumulatively it adds up. But the
Big
other
in the
story
pipeline.
here, there's a larger story at play here, though we've talked about in some of our deeper analysis in previous discussions, is it's not just sort of the volume of hours, it's the business setting behind those hours. They have shifted heavily from full commissions to a co-production model on National Geographic. And it's been a really good transition, I think, from the outside looking in. I think it's actually increased opportunities tremendously for producers. And National Geographic, I think, is kind of really, I think, the leader, and it's certainly one of the few in really being an active player in the co-production community. And you're seeing them go after history and science pretty heavily in those instances. And it's a nice place, I think, that didn't exist as much in the U.S. marketplace at all as recently as 2 to 3 years ago. They, of those
That's really
two and a
interesting.
quarter, about 2/3 of those hours that we see on that bar chart are coming from the co-pro and acquisition marketplace.
So
2/3.
2/3 of the 2025, the yellow line.
That is correct. And prior year, that would have only been about 120 hours, maybe, give or take.
So Dan, I want to ask you a question. Those co-production hours, they're mainly with British production companies, and then secondarily with German and European companies,
Yeah,
maybe with Australia.
I would say it's heavily leaning into the European side of it for sure. You've got Windfall Films, to call out a name, specifically in the mix, is one that I've seen pop up quite a bit. I think I don't know why I'm thinking this. Blink Films, I think, had a new one that just popped in the last few weeks. Arrow Media has got one, I think just aired last week or coming up this week on a Toronto airport. So you're starting to see a much more active place. And on the acquisitions front too, a lot of the distributors they're working with, TVF, Sphere, Abacus, Blue Ant, a real global footprint with a number of these distributors as well.
Dan, I'm going to step right back a bit about your methodology. You're not calling up your best mate at Nat Geo to get this data. How are you actually tracking it? Because I know it takes a lot of work.
Yeah, well, the truth is, it's all out there publicly. There's no secret sauce to this. It's you pay attention to the trades, you listen to panels on like one's on documentarybusiness.com, shameless plug.
Thank you,
But
Dan.
a Real Screen, TV Reel, and World Screen are fantastic with some of their free virtual panel sessions are great. You listen to those, and then you pay attention to the EPG and their schedules and what is physically coming through. Take a lot of notes, create a lot of spreadsheets, and then you add the numbers up. I mean, far too often, and I'm guilty of this as well, when you're actually at a network, or you're at a production company, you're focused on what you do every day. There's so many deadlines and emails and oh my God, crisis moments and stuff that very few people, I'm discovering, really get a chance to stand back and take a look at the larger environment. And the great thing about doing that is as you start to kind of really eyeball individual points and you look at them all in one place, they actually start to crystallize into something, and you see a picture. And you even look at a graph like this, and we look at the story of geographic next door to Discovery visually, and you can see the stories just kind of bounce out at you, and
Yeah,
they reflect the life that we've lived in this business for the last half a decade or so, right?
half a century.
Yeah, it
Hey,
seems like
Dan,
it sometimes.
and because of headcount cuts, there's nobody inside the networks, to my knowledge, that's tracking data like this.